can't wait for you to hear your first Rush tune.
I know you've been waiting for this for a long time.
Yes.
Hi, everyone. I'm here in Canada, and it seems appropriate that my first exposure to Rush should happen in Rush's home country and in a Rush home, because as you all know by now, Karl is a massive fan of Rush, and he's been working with me on the History of Rock Music series this week, and he gave me a drum lesson, and we've been doing all these wonderful things, and it seemed perfectly appropriate to not leave and return back to Tennessee without having heard my first piece of Rush. So, my first song, I don't know if it has vocals or anything in it.
No, it's
Okay.
instrumental.
Is going to be La Villa Strangiato, and I looked up the name because I wanted to make sure I understood the translation of it. It seems to translate roughly as the weird city, the strange town, something like that. And that's about all I know. Well, Karl told me it's early Rush, and he says that Rush has a lot of variety throughout their career. So I'm listening to one of their earlier pieces here. And let's just see how it goes. And I have Karl sitting beside me because I thought maybe since we're here, if I have anything I want to ask him or any comments, things like that. So he's going to watch me do this whole first listen and probably laugh at some of my first impressions.
It's exciting.
And we'll just have some fun here together. It's kind of a pretty opening. I like that. I like the layering of textures. Okay, so far, I really, really like what I'm hearing. Because, well, you've heard me sometimes say that rock music or metal or whatever it is that I'm listening to sounds kind of unimaginatively repetitive. I haven't actually voiced it that way, but you've caught the sense that sometimes I wish something would happen with the repetition. And I'm not complaining about the fact that there's repetition, because that's such a core element of music. Any kind of music, even, I might even say, especially classical music. But I like to hear it used for something. And this is what I'm hearing here as this piece grows and builds and carries on, it has these little figures, musical figures, which are being layered, and the textures and the colors and the sound world is growing, going somewhere, and it's very nice. It's balanced. It has a feeling of intention to it, and at the same time, it's enjoyable to listen to. The different instruments coming in, the expressive melody, that little figure that opened it, and then everything just started to, it was as if somebody was spinning a thread and gradually bringing in more strands to make it more colorful along the way. I like that, and I like what I've heard so far. I don't know where it's going, but up to this point, I'm enjoying this a lot. So I'm going to back up just a little bit, and we'll keep going here. That's interesting what happened here. And I guess I want to go back to the beginning before I go further through the piece, because I was so engaged in what I was hearing that I wasn't really marking, but I want to show you what I'm noticing along the way, and I also want to hear it again before I progress through the music further. So let's go back to the beginning. I want to show you what is so fascinating to me from my experience and the way that I perceive this music now in this moment. So the first thing that I notice is this lovely, lovely little melody coming in here, which is so expressive. Something like that. Let's hear what that is here. And then here's the chord. And here it comes again. It's so sweet. It sounds like a violin or something like that. A very expressively played violin. And then we get this little virtuosic run. Now we're back into this sort of plucked, rippling sound, which happens starting there and We're already on the next page. And you hear something that stands out. It's just a little interval which happens over and over again. But we've got to hurry on to the next page. Because we also have this other tune which is coming in as well. Once we've set up that bum bum rippling, bum bum rippling, and then we have this great little yada-dum bum 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 bum, which goes from there through here. Let me see if I can make this actually visible for the screen. Right, so this little thing which starts right here, yada-dum, and goes on through and then sustains. And then it goes over several times. I'm not going to get into an in-depth right here because I plan to do an in-depth on this piece. And we'll tear it apart and go into all the different elements more. But I want you to hear what's catching my ears as I'm listening to this. And then let's continue. And somewhere in here, I didn't catch it this time around, but at the beginning I heard when the percussion started to give its little tickety 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 tick. It's not triplets actually, it's fours, but ticky 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 ticky. I can't say it fast enough. Anyway, it's another texture that's coming in. Another texture, another dimension, another color. But you see that it's not disrupting the flow of the piece, and that's what I find so enjoyable about it. Let's keep it. Now we hear something else which is also coming in, and that is bum 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 bum. A deeper layer this time. It keeps it dynamic. It keeps it growing and continuing. And now you can hear the bass becoming more active as well. And now seamlessly, absolutely seamlessly, we end up with this bum 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 part of the guitar, which was, I don't want to dive into this too in depth right now, but I have to tell you that I hear that it's coming from the bum 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 that the drum was just doing, and now the guitar has taken it up and is going bum 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 bum. So we have this stacking here. It's just a really well constructed, and it's not because I just like to see things mathematically, aesthetically well constructed. It's because it's well constructed that it gives this great end product, which is so enjoyable, for me at least, to hear. Okay, let's keep going. Because now we're going to hear, I'll tell you ahead of time because I just heard it. We have this bum, 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 and then they switch from that to another little section. And they're bouncing back and forth as we go through this next part of the piece. A few chord changes there to keep it from getting too boring. Back to the... Now here's a little melody, which is very much like something I might expect to play by Bartok on the piano. Circle Durante. to the chords. And now here's the melody again. Here's where the melody is showing up. And now we're back to bum bum bum. It's great the way it throws itself back and forth without feeling fragmented. And then we can feel that it's wrapping itself up and coming to an end. It feels really continuous. There's a continuity, there's a flow. And here we are. Alright, that's as far as I've gotten in the music. I hope you can understand why I'm enjoying this. Because even though it's a style of music that I don't live with, meaning it's rock, it's even metal, right?
Well, it's bordering on...
Bordering on metal?
Yes.
Okay. Metal, rock, metal, whatever it is. It's not classical is what I'm saying. But you can see that it has so many elements of what I understand as being musical elements, musicality, artistry, craftsmanship, all of that. It feels good, it sounds good to me, and I can relate to it, even though it's outside of my typical stylistic world. So, all right, let's keep going because I've got more to get through on this piece. So, here we go. I'll back up just a few seconds. Here's that pretty expressive guitar again. It almost makes me think of a folk instrument, like there's a Romanian folk instrument that I'm going to have to link to and show you because the expressivity of this is almost matching that. There's that high note at the top that's just carrying on. Alright, and now we've shifted to a different section, a different mode. Going back to the section we just passed through, I want to show you a bit of what the page looks like because it looks terrifying to play. Just take a look at this page here and imagine trying to picture what that sounds like. But what we just heard didn't sound terrifying. It sounded beautiful. And, well, of course, this is just trying to write out the notes that the musicians are doing. But it's not giving us the expression, the flexibility, the shaping of the phrases that the guitarist was doing. And it's not telling us how the drummer is pulsing, and all of that is the job of the performer, the artist, the musician, to take something off the page. Well, in this case, I understand that they created the music, and so what we're seeing here on the paper is not something that they picked up and tried to learn. Instead, it's an attempt to lay down on paper a sort of bare bones sketch of what they created. So either way, this is showing you that what they're doing is not so simple as it might sound. At the same time, it's not just the playing of the notes that make it to be so interesting, so engaging, so worth listening to. And I would say this is worth listening to. So, going on, let's see what's coming up next in this next section here. I'm going to back up just a little bit. Here we go. And here you can feel that the rhythm is kind of becoming more prominent, and it's setting us up for something. And the guitar is taking over some more, and it's building up. Nice little bums picking us up and setting us down again. So we went through that guitar part there, and this is the moment where it's been building and there's this rhythm driving, and then it takes us and says, all right, we're going, building momentum, bum, kind of like maybe going over a jump on a motorbike or a bicycle or a skateboard or even a horse, depending on what your preferred mode is. And this is what it is right here. All they did was put a short note on the downbeat, followed by a rest, bum, and there we go, carrying on. Again, it's nothing that I would call unusual, but it's very, very well placed to have a very effective outcome. And it comes after that build-up of the rhythm which I was noticing. Okay, so let's back up just a little bit and see if I can figure out where I am now, because I've moved the music and I don't know where it is on the score, but we'll figure it out. Ah, right there, we heard it. Perfect. Now we're climbing up. Ah, they're expanding on this whole idea of interruption. The guitar is going on. The virtuosic here. This must be the guitar solo. I like the way it still feels melodic in a way, even though it's kind of wild, but it feels like it still has a melodic line. As you know, I love melody. Nice. Playing with that whole interruption again. Everyone's working together here to hold this all together. Interesting change of tonality there. Now we're back to a theme we heard earlier. Right. So, we're back to some of the musical themes that we were hearing earlier in the piece. This melody, bum 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 bum, right? Which I pointed out earlier. Here it is again. And then it goes into this same place that I noticed earlier where the guitar now is playing the same as the drums. Picking up that same rhythm to bum bum bum, da 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 dum bum bum, and so on. So it sounds like we're wrapping up and being reminded of where we came from. Now we're coming back home. And I guess I haven't been paying attention, but we are coming towards the end of the piece, which makes perfect sense. So let's just go on from here and see if we can get to the end. I know that's called a drum fill now. Thanks, Karl. We've been interrupted and changed. Okay, right at the end here. Whew. And we step on the brakes really quick. All right, that was enjoyable. So, Karl, this is my first Rush listen. I promise I didn't react this way with this excitement just to please you because you're sitting here.
I would hope not.
I enjoyed it. So, what else do you think I should take into account since you're so familiar with Rush as I go off to do my in-depth of this piece?
First thing I want to say is I got emotional watching you reacting to it. I actually teared up. I think because when you watch someone who's a musician who really understands the craft, they get it. And they get it right away. And I can't explain that to just anybody. But I could see you were understanding. You're going, yeah, okay, I get this and I get this and I get this. I played the song as a drummer. Graham Floyd, our good friend, he was the guitarist. Okay. Tice Burrows was the keyboardist in it.
Okay.
The song is so dense when it comes to the amount of technique, styles, everything it's going through. And what we have to remember is at this time period in 1977, and by the way, for those of you who don't know, this album that's above my head, that's Hemispheres, which is what the song came from. And the rest of the album is equally as complex as this. But you had a bunch of 25-year-old guys or in their mid-20s who were in an environment where this music was not popular. In fact, you were starting to get into disco and punk rock and things like this, which were the antithesis of what we were listening to here. And they were inspired to sit down and play beyond their level at that time. The use of all the various instruments, especially from Neil Peart, who loved pulling in all these different instruments. At the beginning of the song, there's something called crotales. They're round discs that you play on, and they sound a little bit like bells, similar to orchestra
those
bells.
Bell
Ding,
sounds that were
ding,
there.
Ding, as he's doing the initial theme.
I'm a little bit shy about calling out instrument names with this music because I know what I'm used to hearing in an orchestra.
Right.
But I'm not sure that it's this. Sometimes, and my audience will tell you, they've heard me say, oh, it sounds kind of like this or kind of like that, but I'm a little bit hesitant to call out a specific name saying it's this.
Right.
Because I recognize that it may sound like that, but it might be something different.
Certainly. Whereas
So,
I can
anyway,
do it because
you can do it.
I actually play them.
Yes, so thank you.
And they're crotales that he's actually
Okay.
playing in that portion. The song is fascinating because, as you already expressed to us, it's the way that it grows. And this is something that we've discussed in the past, is this idea, the song is going somewhere.
Yeah.
And you meander through the opening, which you said is very delicate, and then Alex comes in with really virtuosic playing, and then Neil starts to support him, and you get this theme, that dun 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 dun,
Yep.
which comes back throughout the
It
song.
does multiple times.
Which gives us a place of home. It's something that we're familiar with, and so after the song's going through all the middle section, where you've got jazz section, and then the instruments are all over the place. And you got Geddy Lee doing bass runs, and it's, how are you holding this all together? And I will tell you, when you're playing in a band and you're trying to lock this thing down, you're hanging on for dear life. It's all counting. Now, the other thing that you may have noticed throughout it is the significant number of time changes that you're going through.
Yeah, and I didn't comment on those a whole lot, but I did catch a moment where I could circle one at the end.
Sure, and of course, as a drummer, that's
You're
my thing.
hyper-aware, right.
I'm hyper aware of what's
Right.
going on there. And so to stay on top of this piece, and you're going to hear this, bands that were later influenced, bands like Tool, bands like Dream Theater, you'll hear them pulling this kind of stuff into their music as well, which makes it really exciting, especially when you understand the craft and you're going, this is more than the sum of its parts. If you took each of these sections out and played them on their own, yeah, very interesting. But when you have to put those together, it becomes something more.
And that's what I think of as being, the craft of composition and the what sets a really fine composer apart from the crowd is how they are able to take different elements and link them in such a way that they truly belong together.
Yeah.
Even though you might be able to separate them out and enjoy them on their own as well. I'm accustomed to that with my background.
Right.
Because classical music is a very highly developed art form, and there's been a lot of attention put into balance and aesthetics and design and all of this along the way. But I haven't run into that a whole lot with this rock music experiment that I've been doing. But I see it all over here, and I can hear it all through the music. And I guess that's why I found this such a satisfying, relatable listen.
Well, and one other thing to think about too is, imagine you're a 16-year-old kid back in 1977. You hear all this music that's out there, some of it quite mediocre, but it was designed just for the average listener. And you're trying to set yourself apart. You're trying to find your own identity. Many of the people who listened to Rush were often what we call stoners. They were the guys who wore the jean jackets with all the patches all over it. Much like my leather jacket
Your leather
I was wearing in another video that you and I did together. And they were the kids that you found that were often the misfits.
I see.
They didn't see things. And all of a sudden they're slammed with something like this because they're into this style of music, this harder edged music. What they don't realize is they're being exposed to classical music in many ways, not completely, but a lot of elements that come from classical music. They're hearing it for the first time and going, what on earth am I listening to? And that's the appeal of Rush to many of these people.
And you said harder, but I didn't perceive this as incredibly hard.
Right.
I'm not sure I can say exactly why, but maybe I'm sure it has to do with a whole lot of different things, and I'll have to think about that and see if I can come up with an answer.
Sure.
For why I don't perceive this as being so hard as some of the other pieces I've listened to.
I think part of it, though, could be the dynamics.
Dynamics
This is probably the most
going to play
dynamic... sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, dynamics probably play a big part in it. Because, again, that's something that... Well, as you've told me from time to time, metal has sometimes imported classical things and reshaped it. And I haven't been too eager to go listen to that.
Right.
Because I think of metal as being something very hard.
Right.
Well, I haven't been exposed to a whole lot.
That's right.
But the little ones that I've listened to, it's hard, it's dark, it's aggressive, it's simply hard. And I don't like the idea of classical music being played that way.
Right.
That's not why I am drawn to classical music. But I would say this piece of music here easily fits in what I perceive as being the classical style.
Sure. And what you're doing is you're hitting on some very interesting concepts here. And this is why I tell people, be careful when you try to pigeonhole a band like Rush and say, I don't like Rush music. It's because you haven't experienced a lot of what they've done. And they have a huge, massive amount of work that they can call their own. The thing is, with a song like La Villa Strangiata, and much of the music that Rush was doing then comes from what we call progressive rock.
Okay.
Progressive rock, the way I see progressive rock is taking standard rock motifs, but ending up really infusing them with a lot of classical elements and also a lot of unusual and unique ways of playing, especially in the time signature world. This is the prototype which would come along, which would eventually be called progressive metal.
I see.
So what you will find is, as we continue to experience what you and I have been working on together, and this is one of the big reasons I said to you, it's important for you to hear this music before you get into the heavy metal. Because what it's going to do, it's going to develop your hearing and ears to go, okay, I'm jumping from Queen over to Megadeth. Okay, well, that's one way of doing this. But there's a number of interfaces in between, and this is one of those bands that does that.
I understand, yeah.
So what happens is you can hear the classical elements in this song, and yet you didn't find it offensive, even though it's being done on typical rock musician instruments.
It was perfectly fine for my ears.
Totally. Well, now, as they get that harder and get it more into the metal genre, you will be able to now make that jump and say, okay, well, I've heard La Villa Strangiata. This isn't really that difficult, but I can hear it's a harder version. So it's these steps which take you there as opposed to jumping into the deep end of the swimming pool with no context and just going, oh, what have I just found myself in? Whereas when you start to hear these kinds of pieces of music, and Rush is truly brilliant at this, where their music is approachable by the average listener, even though a lot of people don't like Geddy's voice. I love it. I understand why a lot of people don't like it. It's not about that. It's not about a single musician in this band. There's only 3 of them doing this, and the way they're able to craft it so well that each person is putting their maximum effort into it, which is making a piece of music which goes well beyond what most people will even attempt with 3 people. And yet they did this, and when they performed it live, it was note for note the same. So it's the brilliance of the band. I'm really delighted you listened to La Villa Strangiata, or La Villa Strangiato, however we want to pronounce it, for one of the first songs, because you've now seen these 3 young men, and they were young men at the time, pushing the boundaries of not only the music, but themselves to come up, which I would argue is a masterpiece. In the truest sense that this is a masterpiece of what they've actually created.
Well, this has been fun. I am going to spend some time living with this, and I might even come back and talk to you as part of my preparation for the in-depth, if I feel like I need it, or maybe I'll just sit down with the music and explore it.
Sure.
But you will all get to see the in-depth portion of this project. The link is going to be right here when it comes up on YouTube, and check it out and tell me what you think, and I am looking forward to hearing your comments as well. I'll see you all soon.